If you are planning to retire somewhere between 2030 and 2040, there is a number you need to know right now, and it is significantly higher than anything the standard retirement calculators are currently showing you. Most Australians planning their retirement are working off figures that are already out of date. They're using today's cost of living as the benchmark for what they'll need in 15 years. And that assumption, that quiet, unchallenged assumption, could leave you tens of thousands of dollars short at exactly the moment you can no longer fix it. Today we are going to look at what retirement actually costs in 2040. Not a guess. Not an estimate based on wishful thinking. A grounded, inflation-adjusted, healthcare-aware projection of what a comfortable Australian retirement will genuinely cost in 14 years, and what that means for how much super you actually need to have saved by then. If you are in your 40s, 50s, or early 60s right now, what you hear in the next 12 minutes may be the most important financial recalibration of your life. Let's start with what we know today. The Association of Superannuation Funds of Australia, ASFA, publishes a quarterly benchmark called the Retirement Standard. It is the most widely used measure of retirement costs in Australia. Right now, in 2026, ASFA estimates that a single person needs approximately $55,000 per year to live comfortably in retirement. A couple needs approximately $77,000 per year. These figures assume you own your home outright. They assume you have private health insurance. They assume you can afford modest holidays, dining out occasionally, running a car, and maintaining a reasonable quality of life. Not luxury, comfortable. Now here is the question almost nobody asks. What do those same figures look like in 2040? Because the answer is not $55,000. Not even close. Australia's long-run inflation rate has averaged around 2.5 to 3% per year across the past 3 decades. The Reserve Bank of Australia targets an inflation band of 2 to 3%. For the purposes of this projection, we will use a conservative average of 3%, which is within the RBA's own target range, and lower than the inflation Australia actually experienced between 2022 and 2024. At 3% annual inflation over 14 years, $55,000 today becomes approximately $83,000 in 2040. For a couple, $77,000 becomes approximately $116,000. Let that land for a moment. A couple who wants a comfortable retirement in 2040 may need to budget for $116,000 per year in living costs. That is not a scare tactic. That is basic compound arithmetic applied to the RBA's own inflation targets. And before you think that inflation will be lower than 3%, consider that retirement spending is not evenly exposed to inflation. Healthcare, aged care, energy, and insurance, all of which make up a disproportionately large share of retiree spending, have historically inflated at rates significantly above the general CPI. Healthcare inflation in Australia has consistently run at 4 to 5% annually. Energy costs have risen sharply. Insurance premiums, home, car, health, have outpaced general inflation consistently for the past decade. For retirees, the real cost of living tends to increase faster than the headline CPI number suggests. But inflation is only one of the 3 forces reshaping the cost of retirement by 2040. And it may not even be the most significant one. The second force is healthcare. Australians are living longer. Average life expectancy for a 65-year-old Australian today is approximately 85 for men and 87 for women. By 2040, those figures are projected to increase by another 2 to 3 years. More years of retirement means more years of healthcare spending, and that healthcare spending is not flat. It escalates significantly in the final decade of life. A 2024 Grattan Institute analysis found that the average Australian spends more on healthcare in their last 2 years of life than in any other 2-year period combined. As medical technology improves, more conditions become treatable, which is overwhelmingly positive. But treatment has a cost, and that cost is increasingly being shifted toward individuals through higher Medicare gaps, higher private health premiums, higher pharmaceutical costs, and higher out-of-pocket specialist expenses. By 2040, a retiree couple managing one or more chronic health conditions, which is the statistical norm, not the exception, for Australians in their 70s, could realistically be spending $15,000 to $25,000 per year on healthcare costs alone, not covered by Medicare, out of pocket. That is on top of the base retirement living costs we projected a moment ago. Here is the third force, and this one surprises people the most. The aged care system in Australia is fundamentally changing. The Royal Commission into Aged Care Quality and Safety, which concluded in 2021, triggered the largest structural overhaul of the Australian aged care system in decades. New support-at-home programs, new fee structures, new means testing, all of which are rolling out between now and 2035. What this means for someone retiring in 2040 is that the aged care financial landscape will look dramatically different from what retirees experienced even 5 years ago. Under the new support-at-home program, the means-tested component of aged care fees will be assessed against both income and assets, including the family home, which was previously exempt for certain purposes. The independent estimates suggest that the average Australian who enters residential aged care in 2040 will face total accommodation and care costs of between $80,000 and $120,000 per year, depending on their level of care needs and the facility they enter. Nobody who is currently doing a retirement plan is putting that number in their spreadsheet. And yet, statistically, more than half of Australians who reach the age of 85 will require some form of residential aged care or high-intensity support at home. So let's put all three forces together and look at what a realistic 2040 retirement looks like. Consider a couple. We'll call them David and Lynne. Both are 52 years old right now. They plan to retire at 65, which puts their retirement date at 2039, essentially the 2040 scenario we're modeling. They currently have a combined super balance of $480,000. They own their home. They feel reasonably well prepared. Every retirement calculator they've used has told them they've remained track for a comfortable retirement. Here is what those calculators are not showing them. Their projected retirement living costs in 2040, just the base ASFA Comfortable Standard, adjusted for inflation, will be approximately $116,000 per year for a couple. Not $55,000, not $77,000, $116,000. If they live to 85, which is the statistical expectation for a couple their age, they will have 20 years of retirement. At $116,000 per year, their base retirement spending is $2.32 million over 20 years, before healthcare escalation, before any aged care needs, before any buffer for market downturns or unexpected costs. Now add an average of $20,000 per year in healthcare costs from age 75 onward, 10 years of their retirement. That is another $200,000. And then consider that at least one of them, based on current statistics, is likely to need some form of significant aged care support in their 80s. Even at a modest estimate of 3 years of residential care at $100,000 per year, that is another $300,000. The total projected cost of David and Lynne's comfortable retirement through to age 85 is somewhere between $2.5 and $3 million. They currently have $480,000 in super. They are not on track. Now, before this feels overwhelming, it is critical to understand two things that change this picture significantly. The first is the age pension. David and Lynne are not going to fund their entire retirement from super alone. As their super balance draws down through retirement, their age pension entitlement increases. By their mid-70s, assuming their balance has drawn down below the assets test threshold, they may be receiving close to the full age pension. For a couple, the full age pension currently sits at approximately $43,000 per year, and it is indexed to wages, which means it grows with the economy. By 2040, the full couple age pension is projected to be somewhere between $60,000 and $73,000 per year. That $60,000 to $70,000 per year of indexed government income dramatically reduces how hard their super needs to work. The second thing that changes the picture is the superannuation guarantee rate. It is currently 11.5% and will reach 12% from July 2025. David and Lynne have 13 years of working life ahead of them, during which employer contributions at 12% plus any additional voluntary contributions they make, will continue to build their balance significantly. A couple both earning average wages with 12% super contributions over 13 years, combined with reasonable investment returns, could realistically accumulate an additional $600,000 to $800,000 in super before retirement. So David and Lynne are not as far behind as the raw numbers suggest, but they are also not as comfortably on track as the standard calculators show. The gap between the calculator says you're fine and what 2040 retirement actually costs is the gap that this video exists to close. So what should you actually do with this information? The first step is to recalibrate your retirement target using a forward-looking inflation assumption rather than today's costs. If you are planning to retire in 2035 or 2040, use an inflation adjustment of at least 3% per year on the current ASFA comfortable standard figure. The Money Smart calculator allows you to input a custom inflation rate. Use it. The second step is to build a separate healthcare buffer into your retirement plan. Most retirement projections assume flat, consistent spending. Real retirement spending has a curve. Lower in early active years, higher in mid to late retirement when healthcare costs escalate. Plan for a dedicated healthcare reserve of between $150,000 and $300,000, held separately from your primary retirement income fund. This is not pessimism. This is actuarial reality. The third step is to understand the new aged care fee structure and what it means for your specific asset position. The Support at Home program means testing. The residential care accommodation costs and the means-tested care fees are all calculated based on your income and assets at the time you enter care. Understanding this now, rather than when you're in your 80s and need care urgently, gives you the planning time to structure your assets appropriately. The fourth step, and this is the one most people skip, is to review your super contribution rate and your investment option now, in the context of a 2040 retirement target. If your target has just moved from $800,000 to $1.2 million as a result of this recalibration, your contribution strategy needs to reflect that. The earlier you adjust, the more compounding time your additional contributions have. Talk to a financial planner who specializes in retirement income projections, specifically someone who models forward-looking costs, not someone who plugs in today's figures and calls it planning. The broader point here is this. The Australian superannuation system was built on assumptions about retirement costs that were formed decades ago. ASFA updates its retirement standard quarterly, and that is genuinely useful. But even ASFA's figures are a snapshot of today, not a projection of 2040. The gap between what the system tells you to save and what retirement will actually cost in 2040 is not a flaw in the system. It is the natural result of living in a dynamic economy where costs change, medical care improves, lifespans extend, and aged care systems evolve. Your retirement plan needs to be a living document, not something you set once in your 40s and revisit at 64. A plan that is reviewed annually, updated when major life events occur, and calibrated against forward-looking cost projections rather than today's comfortable but misleading numbers. David and Lynne have 13 years to close their gap. With deliberate action, higher contributions, appropriate investment strategy, a healthcare buffer, and an understanding of aged care costs, a comfortable 2040 retirement is absolutely achievable for them, but only if they know what they're actually planning for. Now you do. If today's projection raised questions about your own 2040 retirement target, about how much you actually need, about whether your current contributions are aligned with a 2040 cost reality, write it in the comments. And if you want a breakdown of exactly how to calculate your personal 2040 retirement target, including the inflation adjustment and the healthcare buffer, that is coming in the next video. Your retirement deserves a compass, not guesswork.